KKHT wants you to meet three of the classiest guys in real estate.
I am Chris Kelso, the maestro of mortgage.
I am Rob Cook, the godfather of real estate.
And I'm Joe Orsack, the king of credit swing. And together, we're
the Real Estate Rat Pack.
Much like us, real estate right now is smoking hot. So whether it's buying, selling, or owning, you need to check out the Real Estate Rat Pack.
They're here to take your calls and answer your questions live. Call now, 1-800-808-5548. And now, the Real Estate Rat Pack.
Or the goat.
Or the goat. Exactly. The goat always yells.
I know how much Kim loves the goat. She looks at you and goes, really?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
You think
Like, did you really do that?
Well, I'm going to do a shout out to Myra Johnson this week. We met her over at the Intero networking thing. It was April Fool's Day. And
Yes.
Of course, I thought they were going to we were going to show up for the networking event. There'd be no event. And that was a joke, right? But no, they actually had a great event. Myra Johnson with Monogram Residential has agreed to come on the show.
Yes, that is correct. She's
Tall,
gonna bring us
beautiful
some
young
guests.
woman, and she sent me cookies.
I know.
Turns out she's in real estate.
she did not send me cookies, but she sent you cookies.
Well, you know, what can I tell you?
But, if she's listening to the show, hint, hint.
So anyhow, I wanted to do a shout out to her, and we look forward to her on the 18th, and she's going to snag two top professionals who do relocations in rentals.
Wow,
We've not done
okay.
a lot on rentals in the past, and that's
Okay.
a big part of our market. Every year, but probably the last 5 years, we've gone up about 20% in rentals.
Wow.
And we've talked about the rental generation coming up, is that a lot of them are coming out of college strapped with, debt.
Right.
And so they're opting to rent. Of course, and a lot of them just don't know.
Some people
they
would
could
say
buy
buried in debt.
Yes, yes, exactly. And buried in debt. So, if you get a master's degree, you could be at $150,000-$200,000 in debt pretty easily.
Well, and the other thing, Ted Jones, we were at him at the WCR event. That, by the way, that Tim O'Neill comped us very nicely on, by the way.
Yes, thank you.
Tim. But, Ted Jones was talking about the growth in that multi-tenant, multi-unit market right there, about how it's just, absolutely boom. Now, we're going to see a little bit of subsiding in regards to some of that build-out, which I think is pretty good, actually, because there's a lot of them going up. But if you see what's going on in Houston over the past probably 5 years in regards to those type of structures, it just goes to show the demand that we have.
Yeah, well, we talk about this a lot. The developers will say, we have a need for, rentals and high-end rentals. So they go out and build it. And then, but, about 100 other developers get the same idea. They don't really talk amongst themselves. And so all of a sudden you've got a lot of projects coming online, and we were able to fill them for a while. But now we're getting to the point, it's like, okay, we've overbuilt again. It's that cycle we get into.
Always is.
It's always been a cycle, and we'll overbuild, and then we'll catch up, and then we'll overbuild and catch up, and it's not going to change.
Right, I would absolutely agree.
So I don't know that we really have a show today. We thought we'd get a bunch of guys together we like and talk about stuff.
This is the guy stuff show. We got some great guys in the studio.
We have a bunch of random folks. Random people.
Basically, we just kind of invited everybody we ran into. Hey,
everyone that we hang out with all the time. That is correct.
I'm trying to figure out if that was a compliment or not. I don't know.
And that is the great Michael Roddy.
Yes.
Today's show is what happens when you're having cigars and drinking wine together.
Let me ask you.
Hey, you want to be on the show tomorrow? Why not?
Is anybody else showing up that we don't know about yet? Anyway, we have
I don't know,
Vaughn
you
Peterson
guys-
in the house with clean air.
Yes.
Say hi, Vaughn.
Yes.
Good morning and hello. It's good to see all of you here this morning.
And we always enjoy having you with us. He's a great friend and has a great business. And, of course, you just heard from Michael Roddy. Wasn't sure he got complimented it or not, but it was a compliment, Michael. Just take it that way. And, of course, the great Tim O'Neill with State Farm, one of our absolutely outstanding
Waving
sponsors.
in the corner for those visually impaired by the limitations
Waving in the corner,
of radio
shaking his
waves.
head.
So I thought we'd probably talk about what we want to talk about.
Well, you can talk about anything.
Yeah.
I'm going to start off by talking about something. I had a compliment that we did here when I walked in the studio. Vaughn Peterson with Clean Air, let me tell you, there was a case that he recently did up on the north side of town. And let me tell you, they ranted and raved about how good the service was, how clean the home smelled afterwards, how fresh it was. And most people don't realize this. A lot of times when you walk into a home and you are struggling with issues associated with, mold, or you're struggling with issues associated with smell or pet odor, or just simply somebody's cooked in the same spot for 20 years in a row, let's say, Let me tell you what Vaughn does in regards to getting rid of those smells.
It's a miracle.
And this is a really good close friend of mine who attests and says it's absolutely the most amazing thing she's ever seen.
I don't know why you're not swamped, because I think it's a modest charge. It kills bacteria, it kills mold, it kills a lot of things, and it does it in 24 hours.
Yep.
Well, this is, and thank you very much for the referral, Chris. I really appreciate that.
Anytime, bud.
This was a good friend of Chris's, and I got a call while I was in the truck driving, and it was Chris, and it was his friends in the car. And tell them a little bit about Jody and her husband and what they do.
Well, Jody is a great agent up on the north side. She's actually with the Doug Erdy Group up there. And, just a very good, top-notch agent. And her husband actually is a builder for one of the big building companies actually here in town. So,
that's right, Perry Homes. Right?
Perry Homes, that is correct. So, they know a lot about real estate and about building, fortunately. So they definitely know a lot right there. And like you said, and they had an instance in which they needed to resolve some sporulation and some smell.
Well, they had a situation when you opened the show. You're talking about
Really?
Sporalization. Yes,
that's what he told. He taught me that, by the way. I was on the conference call with Vaughn.
So yeah, and I appreciate you giving me the heads up that you're in the car on speakerphone. That's always a good idea.
Yeah, I started off by saying, "Hey, Vaughn, by the way, this is Chris Kelso. I'm on the speakerphone. I have guests, so don't say anything inappropriate." And he said, "Me?
Why would I do that?" You opened the show talking about renters.
He's one of those friends.
This particular situation with this home was that there were renters in the home. And in many cases, you're talking about people renting and this thing. They don't have any skin in the game. It's not their home. So if a leak occurs, they'll just let it go for a couple of months. And that's what happened. A leak was occurring in the bathroom. The renters paid no attention to it, did not let the landlord know. And by the time they figured it out, why they had a terrible mold problem. And they actually had to remove the floor, the tile, the subfloor. There was about a 4-foot by 4-foot hole in the garage ceiling up to that bathroom. And when that happens and you start removing the moldy areas, mold sporulates. It means it becomes airborne. The spores go airborne.
Sporalization.
That's sporalization. We like big words here. It makes us feel
we have
smart.
to have it back to the shop by next Monday.
That's right. I've got one of those word of the day calendars. You're lucky I wasn't here yesterday. Anyway,
become sporilified.
Sporilified. There was a problem, and you could smell it and you could feel it. And actually, Jody had mentioned that when they had been in the house, both of them had felt sick and got headaches, and that's quite common actually when you have that serious a situation. But thank you for that referral. I got out there right away. They removed the offending material. I was able to get in, apply the clean air process, which in this case was 24 hours using electrocatalytic technology, more large words, and totally took care of the problem. It's not expensive, and did a good job for them, and they're very happy, and that's what it's about. Almost all my business comes by referral, and I'm never too busy for your referrals, so thank you for that.
Vaughn, I got a question about, suppose you found yourself in say a radio studio with a bunch of guys who've been out all night smoking cigars.
Okay.
And there was sort of this little faint cigar, odor, let's say.
A little aroma left over.
What could you do about, cigar residual funk?
Well, I actually was the guy.
Well, that's the technical term.
I was actually the guy that fixed the smoke problem in the cigar bar that was over in Upper Kirby.
The one is no longer there.
Was it? Yeah, the one that's not there anymore. But they went from Downing Street. Yeah, they went from
cigar
smoking,
residual funk.
They went from smoking to non-smoking. They smoked in there for a couple decades,
Or
I guess,
CRF.
at least 20 years. And they'd had somebody else come out and treat it several times. It didn't work. I came in less than 24 hours, and you could walk in and you would smell no smoke. In fact, I've fixed places where they've gone into a building, pulled a half-burned log out of the fireplace, and you hold it up to your nose, and you don't smell smoke when I'm done treating the house. So
is your building suffering from CRF, also known as cigar residual funk?
Yeah.
Well,
They call clean air.
When I get home from the Heights Cigar Lounge, I just hang my clothes up in the laundry room and run the machine for 15 minutes and take care
We're
of
going to
it.
send Paul an invoice now, too.
That is true.
But
Well, I'll tell you, your service is excellent. I will tell you this: you got out there immediately. You know, and like I said, you're the name I give out when it comes to cigar residual funk issues and anything else.
Mold, cat odor. I do cat houses, the type where there's cats been living in the house.
Wow. You heard it here, folks. Vaughn Peterson does cat houses.
It's houses that have had animals in them.
Oh,
Yes.
wow.
And that's...
Are humans considered
You
animals?
really don't want to run into cigar residual funk in a cat house.
That's true. And I imagine it occurs to.
That's a double problem.
You know, I think what happens is you get kind of put in the same category as those people who come out and brush the inside of ducks and things like that. And we
the
know
duck does not like it, trust me.
The ducks don't like it. But there's some problems with that, and it doesn't really last.
I don't recommend that people have their ductwork in their home brushed out, because when companies come out and start pushing things through the vents, they can pull the tape joints apart, and then you've got a real nightmare in that kind of a situation. What I do is a sterilization process. Basically sterilizes the inside of all the ductwork, the AC system, all the surfaces in the home, the drapes, the carpet, the paint, the walls, everything, and just sterilizes it. In fact, doctors refer me to their patients who have autoimmune disorders and other problems associated with cancer treatments, so I can make their house safe for them to live in. So it's also a treatment that's done for people's health as well as just odors and mold.
Yeah, well, it's a great service. And how do people get a hold of you?
But I say, you know, let's give how they can get a hold of you, because I know people are dying to call you right now.
My number is 832-276-6000. The company is Clean Air, and I better spell it because it's easy to get it wrong. It's CLEANEAIR.com. It's all one word, CLEANEAIR.com.
Cleanair.com.
So we've got Mr. Michael Roddy over here. He's just sitting there quietly going, yeah, I'm listening to all this stuff. But I know you got stuff. What's going on in your world?
It is all very interesting stuff. I was just sitting back and listening to Vaughn talk, and I happened to be looking around, and they brought this chair in for me that I think came out of elementary school, because I'm sitting closer to the floor than anybody here.
That's all.
And you're the tallest one.
Don't you remember Robert J. Ringer's book, Winning by Intimidation? The first thing he did is everywhere he put in front of him, he put in low chairs so he could peer over them. And
I think it's working.
I don't get that perspective very often, you know?
Hey, Roddy, push the button on the left-hand side. It's got hydraulics in the chair.
I tried it. And
Hydraulics are busted.
It's got hydraulics. It'll jump up and down.
The hydraulics are out.
You can get the front end to bounce even. It's
Now,
cool.
Michael, let everybody know what you do, by the way, and who you're with, if you don't mind.
I am a residential real estate advisor, an expert in residential real estate.
Yes, you are.
And I am with Remax Memorial Town and Country. I have been.
Fix that.
Yes. Maybe,
you can definitely tell we're all
maybe
friends.
talking with a company that starts with a B.
There you go.
Yes. Been a realtor for the past 18, going into my 19th year. Wow. And with this particular company, with the Remax office that I office out of, I am going into my 15th year with them.
Wow.
Yes.
Let me tell you, for all those listening, great individual, great person, great agent. But, you know, I always tell everybody it's the best thing is to qualify somebody on who they are as a person, and just a quality individual right there. You know, I can't believe you hang out with all of us.
Somebody that truly puts his clients first. I've watched them in action, and that is what we are charged with doing, is put your clients' needs before your own needs.
Oh, yeah.
Because your needs will get met if you do the first.
Well, you know, I always say if you do the right thing, then the right thing happens. You know, if you do the wrong thing, then the wrong thing is a simple thing of supply and demand sort of type thing, right?
Sure,
so,
absolutely. And thank you for the nice compliments. It's very nice of you.
We keep Michael Roddy in our cigar group to meet OSHA smile
quota
requirements. Yeah, quotas. Yeah.
But let me tell you, you know, and this.
I don't think I've ever seen him not smiling.
No, I don't think
well, that was actually my nickname growing up. Was Smiley.
Smiles?
Really?
It was
Smiley.
Smiley. Yes,
There
that was
we
a
go.
nickname.
You know, that's going to stick.
That
from
makes
now
a
on
lot
now.
of sense.
Yeah, you know, when that came out of my mouth, I was thinking maybe I should not have.
Hey, boys, it's Smiley.
Well, you know, time flies when you're having fun, and we are 15 minutes in, still have 45 minutes to go, but we are coming up against a break right now.
Well, we got to pay for the show.
We got to pay for it somehow, so stay tuned. We'll be right back.
This hit that ice cold Michelle fight for that white gold. This one for them hood girls, them good girls, straight masterpieces. Styling, wildin', living it up in the city. Got Chuck's on with Saint Laurent. Gotta kiss myself, I'm so pretty. I'm too right.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Rat Pack Radio Show with Chris, Joe, and Rob. The crew is taking your calls, so dial in at 1-800-808-5548.
And we're back. We're having a great time.
Hours of practice to get that down.
It does. It takes, you have to do the whole delay, But, if you want to talk to any of our great guests today, you can reach us at 800-808-5548. If you want to talk about sporulation or anything associated with the CF, what is it?
CFR? No, cigar residual funk.
Oh, yes.
CRF.
CRF. That is correct. So if you want to talk about any of that, we are here to take your calls live and have a good time, hopefully.
We were chatting with Michael when we went to break and stuff like that. So
yes,
tell us what's happening out there. I know you do a lot over in West University and Bel Air and that area. What's happening over there?
But before he does that, though, I want him to give a big shout out to his coworker as well.
Oh yeah, you got yes.
Lisa. Yes, Lisa. Hi, Lisa.
There you go, Lisa. That's as good as you're going to get right now.
That's it.
No last name.
Well, speaking
Which for years
of,
was like the mythical Lisa. Because,
that's right.
Never even knew she existed.
No one ever saw her.
Yeah.
She was very much behind the scenes, and here recently she has been out more and more and breaking out of that shell, and
that's a good thing.
has really talked to Chris, I think, more than anyone.
Yes, no, and great individual, by the way. I never forget when she was telling me, she goes, I have a working business partner, and his name is Michael Roddy. I'm like, excuse me, come again? I'm like, and you've been keeping her secret. Why? So, no, great individual, though. You guys make a great team.
Thank you.
So.
And, Rob, you were talking about West University and really most of the areas inside of the Loop. And just a quick observation from my part is that it seems like here in the last couple of months, the inventory has been increasing. So we are moving more towards what I think Ted Jones called a normal market. And what I mean by that is at one time I was up here and we were talking about absorption rates, et cetera, and it was about a 2.3 to a 2.5 or 6 months worth of inventory. And on my most recent data that I have, it's showing about a 5 to 5.5 month
That's
inventory
market
now.
improvement.
And yes, but moving more towards a normal market. We are still in a seller's market as we talk right now, but I do think that it is moving more towards a normal market, which I think is good all the way around. And truly, I have not seen, this was a question that I had just the other day. They were asking me about values and have I seen a decline in overall value? And I have not. We still have that steady increase that we've had for quite some time in the value of homes. So even though it may take just a little bit longer now to sell a home because there is more inventory coming on the market, and we did just come out of a slower time of the year, meaning around the holidays.
Right.
So it may take just a little longer to sell the home. However, the value is not declining.
And I would tend to agree with you. The only areas that we see from an appraisal perspective, which is obviously the measurement of value right there, is in areas in which you still have multiple offers. They're bidding over a price of a property.
Yes.
And then that might not come in at an appraised value. Why? Because if you don't have everyone doing the same, if you don't have everything selling over the market value, you're not going to be able to get that true comparative market analysis that gives you that value. But I would agree with you, is traditionally speaking, everything that we've seen, we have been seeing it's been within the same area. I mean, it's been very steady. We haven't seen a lot of stuff come in way under. And most of the time, the stuff that you do see come in that misses value, it's going to miss value.
Right.
Very, very rarely do not know it's going to miss value.
And also, sellers are still, some of them are still of the mindset that we are in this ultra hot market and that they're just going to put their place on the market at the price that they want to.
Right.
And that it'll sell within a few days, and they're finding out that is not necessarily the case. Especially if you're inside of Loop 610.
No, I would agree.
This is true also in the suburbs. There's some areas that are still extremely active. Katy is one of them that has remained extremely active and extremely viable communities out there. And it's amazing as to how quickly the homes that are priced correctly in the market, that are ready for the market, they are still moving quickly and really haven't had much in the way of appraisal issues out there. But there are areas of town that have. You're absolutely right.
You know, one of the things I would tell everybody is rates are at an all-time low still. You're still at that perfect storm. You have great inventory. You've got rates that are absolutely incredible. I'm going to put a big I'm going to let all of our listeners know right now, if you have not evaluated your interest rate for a refinance, do so, especially if you can go down to a 15-year. More importantly, if you're in the market to look at buying a property, call Michael Roddy, obviously number one. But number two is know that right now rates are at an all-time low again. So it's that perfect time to get out there and to look. But I wanted to say one thing that Michael was saying. You were talking about the ultra-hot markets. Here's the situation I've been seeing recently with what's been going on. Individuals are selling their home and buying a new home.
Right.
And the buyer, the purchaser of the seller in this case, all of a sudden has issues. Might be they backed out because layoff, they back out because of relocate, whatever it might be. And so how are you advising individuals? Because I've been seeing a lot more of that. Individuals who are buying on contingency, and then those contracts are actually moving out of contract, unfortunately. You know, how would you suggest people to get around, or more importantly, to cope with some of those things that are going on?
All right, now you're talking about from the seller side or from the buyer side?
Sort of both, right? Because you have a seller, who's selling their home, and they're also the buyer of a new property, and
Gotcha.
So it's that effect, that goes down. It's sort of that trickle effect that goes all the way downstream. So what ended up happening is they can't sell their home now. They're looking at buying a new home, and you have a seller of that home that they're trying to buy that now is affected by, so we're seeing a lot more of that trickle-down effect than we have because some of the changes going on.
Sure. And that's where it really does help to have an expert in real estate, realtors out there to assist you and to try to do their best to eliminate those situations from happening. Now, one of the things that we can do from a seller's point of view, especially if they are in a very active area, is not only do you have, for the seller, if you've got an initial contract, we are still getting multiple offers. Now, they may not all be above the list price. They may be at list price or close to it. But if you can strive to get a backup offer, along with that initial offer. If something happens to that initial offer, then you have a backup in place, and it moves to that number one position.
Gotcha.
So that helps to protect a seller. Now, as far as on the buy side, what would you say would be the things with a buyer if they were to have something come up, whether it's in their lives with a job, et cetera?
Right.
What would you say is the number one question there as far as protecting a buyer?
A lot of times on the buyer side, it's that trickle effect, right? So I think what you said is perfect on the fact that they're selling a home, have a backup offer, have a contingency, keep it option pending, continue to show.
Sure.
I think all that's important right there. On the buyer side, I tell everybody, my personal suggestion I tell everybody from a financing perspective is, number one, make sure you can qualify with both mortgages as a backup right there. That's number one. And if you can't, sometimes it's best to make sure that you go through the sales process, even if there's an interim move sometimes before you get into that new home, right?
I think that is absolutely wonderful advice. And one of the things you and I have been working on lately is getting a buyer with you very, very early on.
Yes.
To where you can run them through the entire process, not only pre-qualify them, but pre-approve them. And, we recently had a situation where I asked you if you could put something into your underwriting department and get me a answer back.
That is correct.
For a particular buyer and a particular property. And I think doing those things in advance, you've got a knowledgeable realtor, you have a very knowledgeable lender, and working together, I think you can help to eliminate the issues that may come up on a buyer side and certainly on a seller side.
I would thoroughly agree. It's one of those things is a lot of times that little bit of additional information is a huge difference. In this case, we need to look and see there was a property that you and I were looking at for a mutual client. And, your concern, which was actually validated, was we didn't think it was going to make the value, and putting a contract in it for a client who can't make up that difference was just not something to do at that point.
Sure.
And so, it saved you from going out and putting a contract in place. It saved the client from going out there and getting their expectations up about buying a piece of property that we'd have to come back in and say, you can't afford it, based upon the requirements with appraisal, et cetera, et cetera. So, there's a lot of stuff like that I absolutely agree. Getting with the right person, as we talk about all the time, getting with a professional, thus you, me, somebody on this show, is extremely important, because that can be the difference between you going through and having an incredible time in the real estate, experience, or going through it and saying, I never want to do that again.
Exactly. And one of our goals as realtors and you as a lender is you want to make sure that the client has a pleasurable experience. We try to make it a happy time for them moving into a new house. In a lot of cases, it's their very first home. Right. So you try to make it an enjoyable experience instead of one that is full of stress.
Oh, I would thoroughly agree. And there's enough stress out there already,
There
right?
is. And so we do a lot in the background to do our best to assure that they do have a pleasurable experience with it.
Yes.
Now, you were talking about interest rates. And one of my questions is, I've heard, as most of our listeners have, I'm sure, I've heard about interest rates starting to inch up. So I think right now is an outstanding time to buy. Right. But they're moving around slightly. Any foresight as to where interest rates may be going over the next several months?
Well, my crystal ball tells me. No, I'm just joking. Now, one of the things, yeah, exactly, right? Yeah. No, but one of the things that's happened is our U.S. government has really kept rates in check. I mean, it's one of the things we know. We've really been on a money and currency and interest rate control system for a long time now. Ever since 2008, we've really been under that system. What the government wants to eventually do is release that and stop artificially maintaining rates, right? The problem that I think that they're going to have is the second they do that, they're going to spike up, right? And so what we have to do right now is, they're trying to make the market take over slowly but surely and not artificially control them. But one of the things that is happening is we're seeing these volatility periods. We're seeing that interest rates all of a sudden become really good, and then for a week or 2 weeks they go up quite a bit, and then they come back down. I suggest to all clients is remember one thing. Just because the interest rate went from a 3.875 to a 4.25 is not the end of the world, by the way. It's still an excellent interest rate.
It is, absolutely.
It still is really good. Now, today, rates are in the threes. I mean, they're in the mid, they're probably in 2.8 for a 15-year on average. They're probably about 3.75 for a 30-year on average. So they're great right now. But if they do up to 4 or 4.25, it's not the end of the world. It's something that we eventually have to see. And what we are going to see by the end of this year, rates have no choice. And I've been saying this for years now, by the way, and Rob's laughing at me because I'm always saying this. Well, but they have no choice but to move up.
The Michael and Chris show, or the Michael and Chris corner over here.
Yeah. So, y'all hang out there, don't worry. We'll talk about everything. So, we are coming up against a break, though. I've got Ashley looking at me going, get off the mic. I've got to go to a break. So, we got no choice.
Plus, it looks awkward.
That is correct. It does look awkward. So, stay tuned. We're going on a break. We'll be right back.
Yours and yours alone. I'm here to tell you, honey, that I'm bad to the bone. Bad to the...
Welcome back to the Real Estate Rat Pack Radio Show with Chris, Joe, and Rob. The crew is taking your calls, so dial in at 1-800-808-5548.
And we're back.
And Chris,
who I got a text from?
I want you to know something.
Yes.
Myra Johnson messaged me on Facebook and said she's going to have to buy you cookies.
Oh, Myra, I love you. Thank you very much. I can't wait. You said they were still warm when they were delivered to your office.
They were still warm. And anyway, she was going to call in, but she's working out right now like a good, disciplined, responsible person.
I'm glad to know there's somebody out there doing that.
That's
hey,
right.
you know who else is working out and listening to the show right now is Teresa Kennedy, by the way. So big shout out Teresa Kennedy.
We used to get a lot of words of wisdom from her.
I got her words of wisdom just now.
I don't know if it's a positive thing that people only think of us when they're working out. So it's like, it's like a bad thing that
they see me and they're like, "Dang, I don't want to get fat like Chris."
Joe, we were talking about interest rates and credit and things like that, and you and I were talking, I guess, during the week about some changes that are going to be beneficial to people who had some issues with their credit and things like that, it can be very beneficial to them.
Yeah, there's a lot going on the credit front. From lawsuits against the credit bureaus.
You guys have lawsuits like that? No way.
Yes. That was a big lawsuit that was won in New York. The New York State Attorney General had filed a suit against the credit bureaus. And it gets pretty, geeky in the stuff that went down, 40-something pages.
De-geek it for us and just give us the bottom line.
But some really positive stuff that came from that lawsuit, in essence that the credit bureaus weren't providing any supporting documentation to the creditors in the dispute process. And a lot of stuff that we knew was going on for a long time. And, they would basically you could send in 20 pages worth of supporting evidence to say, this is the issue with what you're reporting. It's incorrect. Here's the facts, that type of thing. And they would distill it down into a 2-digit code and a couple-line summary. And that's what they sent to the creditor, which was really a massive disservice to the consumer. And it's what we have fought for years. Well, so one of the great things that has come from that is that they have to provide the supporting documentation to creditors. So they've got to make a massive system adjustment to deal with that. And another massive thing was that if the consumer still disputes the accuracy of the results after the first round of verification, it has to go to a case manager. So they actually have to assign a human being to look at it rather than everything just being scanned through a computer. So all of which can be very, very positive for the consumer. So that's a beautiful thing for our industry. Now the credit bureaus, still being the credit bureaus, they don't like our industry because we are the check and balance of the industry for them. So they don't like us, and consequently they're still trying very hard to throw up the smoke and mirrors and send letters back to consumers saying, well, this looks like a suspicious inquiry, and we're not going to investigate it because we're doubting it. Like somebody's going to steal your identity in order to dispute something on your credit. I mean, that's just the most retarded thing I've ever
you haven't
seen.
heard about the new thing going on, stealing identity to dispute credit?
Yeah. So it's for people who are really bored.
Yeah.
Yes.
The bored identity thief.
It's STDC.
Yeah. So that's what's going on that front. Very positive stuff for the consumer who's dealing with identity theft. That's a great example where you're providing all the supporting documentation to say that your identity's been stolen, and you send that to the creditor, and they just say, oh, yeah, it's been verified. And what? What do you mean it's been verified? Yeah, we got a signature on this application here, so, yeah, that's legit. Well, what about, the part where that signature doesn't look anything like my signature, that there's no supporting, photograph or anything else, blah, blah, blah. Now they actually have to look at all that paperwork, and it should be a great thing for the consumer. The other thing that you were referring to was FICO 09. Which came into existence in the fall of 2014, the very end of 2014. Some very positive things there in that one of the biggest issues that Americans face in credit challenges is medical debt. Over 50% of America has a medical collection on their credit. And the why it's such a problem is that it's first of all, there's all kind of craziness in the medical billing,
How about the billing industry to begin with on that one?
So there's nightmares in that side of it. I mean, I've had the issue where something went to insurance to be paid, and insurance decided like 9 months later that it wasn't going to pay that, and it back billed it to the doctor. The doctor system didn't even look at it. It said, oh, this is 9 months old and hasn't been paid, sent it straight to collection. So the first notice I ever had about it was from a collector. I'm like, well, who are you, and what are you calling about, and what's this $37? It was some arbitrary little small amount, So I had to, weed through that process. It was a nightmare. That kind of stuff happens day in and day out in the industry, and that's the first level of craziness. But then the second thing with medical debt is that is medical debt really predictive of a person's ability or likelihood to pay? Because a medical debt is not something people typically incur by choice. It's something that happens to them. Whereas if you go charge something on a credit card, that is a conscious decision to say, hey, I want to go get this, and now if I don't pay for it, then that's a predictive of my paying behavior. But most of the time, people don't choose to have a heart attack or choose to have some medical procedure where they go and incur debt. And so it's really, from the behavioral prediction process, which is what the whole point of a credit score is, it's really not an accurate indicator of how people pay their debts. And so the new FICO 09 scoring model is going to take into account a much lower impact of medical collections. So the scoring model really is going to improve in that area, and I think that's a beautiful idea. That definitely should be that way. Also in FICO 09 is paid collection, something that most consumers don't realize, and we get this a lot, is that paying a collection account doesn't improve your credit score. It doesn't help it at all. There's from a score model, there's no benefit whatsoever in having a paid collection because it doesn't change your score at all. Now, is it the right thing to do and all that sort of, that's a different subject. If you owe the debt and you want to pay it and that's the morally right thing to do, great, but don't do it because you think it's going to improve your credit score. In fact, it could lower your credit score. That's the really crazy aspect of it.
And doesn't it kind of reactivate the file also?
Yeah. I mean, basically, the way it's set up now is that the law requires you to report that payment activity. And so on a collection, you take an old collection account that's, 2-3 years out, and, the 80% of your credit score comes from the last 24 months of activity. So if the collection account was 3 years old and you pay it, it basically makes it look like a brand new collection account, and it can tank your credit score, which is ludicrous. I mean, that's like one of the silliest concepts ever in the scoring model. So FICO 09 now is going to remove the impact of that collection. Now, how much and all that's kind of like the Coke formula. They don't tell you what the impact is going to be, but it's going to lower the damage of a paid collection so that it will actually now be a benefit to pay the collection account.
But I've got the Coke formula. You want to?
Yeah. Yeah. So some major things there that are positives about the new scoring model. They're already going to be testing it out with, I think there's like 10 different credit card companies that they're introducing the scoring model with to see how it works. What we've learned is that, especially in Chris's industry, in the mortgage industry, the banks are very slow to adopt new scoring models. I mean, FICO 08 is really just now kind of becoming prevalent, and that's like 6 years old. So
yeah, no, and you're absolutely right. It takes a long time. The other thing that they're going to start doing, from what I was understanding, Joe, talk about this, is they're also going to start taking the things into consideration, such as how you pay your electric bill, how you pay your water bills, your utilities. That's another big thing, because a lot of times, the one thing that the industry does, the mortgage and credit industry, is we get on to people for not having any debt. So even if they pay, all their other bills on time, they pay an insurance bill to Tim, they pay, their water bill, their electric bill, their cell phone bill, etc. But they maintain no credit cards. There's no reward to them.
Yes.
So they're also making some changes in that regard.
That's correct. The FICO 09 will take into consideration some of these other sources that the current model doesn't, and that's definitely going to be an improvement to the model. From a standpoint, even a biblical standpoint of not being in debt, that's one of the hurdles that you face. There's a very popular name on radio,
yes, which we all know.
Yes, and I agree with the vast majority of what he has to say, but how he goes about dealing with credit isn't really necessarily great advice. And in the interest of being a good steward of your finances, it behooves you to understand how credit works, because you can absolutely use credit cards, those type of things in a responsible way that doesn't require you being in debt while still improving your credit scores, which then gives you the opportunity to pay less on auto insurance, home insurance, all that stuff. Credit impacts so many areas of your life. So it really, you should understand how it works, at least moderately.
Well, and said individual also sells off a lot of information so that people go out and get financing for different things, by the way. So I thought that was always pretty interesting. Joe, I know how to reach you, and I'm going to say it. It's 281-914-4116.
Yay!
But you can also go to ImproveMyCreditUSA.com. You have a new website coming out, and you have some great testimonials. Talk a little bit about that.
Man, I'm so pumped about it. The company that is one of our sponsors, Webimax, they have done a phenomenal job. I've just would hate to be on their side because I'm like the nightmare client when it comes to design and everything else, because I'm extremely picky on image and on branding and all that kind of stuff. And I've ran that poor guy ragged. He hates to see my emails coming. But they've done a phenomenal job. And we're going to be launching our website on April 15th. That's our launch date. And we're super pumped. It looks amazing, and I've let people see it preliminarily and have gotten tremendously good feedback. So
after you filed your taxes,
yes,
go to improvemycreditusa.com.
Taxes are due October 15th, aren't they?
Yeah.
October 15th.
October 15th, I guess, is what the majority of them want to have them done. Yeah, what happens is everybody who gets money back, April 15th. Anyone who owes, October 15th. That's traditionally the way right there.
Although you're supposed to pay on the 15th regardless.
That is correct. Well, we are time flies. You're having fun. Again, you can reach Joe at 281-914-4116. We have one more segment to go, so stay tuned. We'll be right back.
With an equal opportunity for all to sing, dance, and clap their hands. Well, just because the record has a groove, don't make it in the groove.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Rat Pack Radio Show with Chris, Joe, and Rob. The crew is taking your calls, so dial in at 1-800-808-5548.
And we're back. Hey, time flies when you're having fun. And we have, no one ever puts Tim O'Neill in the corner. But we did today.
We did today. He's been in the corner in the dark.
He's been in the corner. But,
he's pretty well
we
behaved
have an incredible sponsor in Tim O'Neill.
My mom is calling.
Yes.
And she obviously doesn't listen to the show.
Right. Yep.
That's a mom's obligation, isn't it?
Yeah.
So anyway, you're throwing us off you're throwing us off track here, Joe. Tim, you and I were talking about the break and stuff like that. About we had that issue with renters that Vaughn was describing, and talk a little bit about that. Is that what do you tell somebody like that? It had a renter in there, and they've got insurance, but they're not looking at the property. They're not inspecting their properties. What do you do?
Well, the rates are built around that level of risk. There's a whole universe of owner-occupied reality, and then there's tenant-occupied reality. And all of the discounts and all the favorable pricing, not surprisingly, is all focused on owner-occupied, and that's what most insurance companies want to write, owner-occupied, a house and 2 cars and 2 kids and a cat, and everything's fine. When you get tenants in, people have to understand when, and say you could be someone who's just, going to have their first home and they're going to rent it out and then buy a bigger home as they upgrade rather than sell. And, that's a business. When you decide to keep a home and rent it out for profit, you're now in an enterprise. And there's an education process where we have to let them know, okay, this is not a homeowner policy anymore. This is a rental dwelling policy, and this is a money-making proposition for you. And we experience on the insurance side a lot more loss activity in both frequency and severity in tenant-occupied, whether that's just a fact of human nature, or, because there's pride of ownership, and I guess you see that in any reflected in a lot of different ways. But yeah, the loss ratios on tenant-occupied don't compare in any way to owner-occupied, and so the rates are obviously going to reflect that. And eligibility is, not as widespread. You can get homeowner policies all the time, but rental dwelling policy is a niche market, and it's not. It fluctuates, and so sometimes you can get them, and sometimes it's more difficult.
Now, the circumstance in which he described, is that something that would typically be covered by your policy? Is that a depends answer?
It is, but not to get too deep into it, but it's semi-interesting because when people talk about a leak, a plumbing leak.
And okay, a plumbing leak, not a cooking leak.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's say you've got a plumbing leak, and this gets into it. Now,
a leak?
There's this. He means a.
Oh wow, that was a real.
Onion, a shallot.
That was a
shallot.
That was a stretch.
Yes.
Wow.
So here's how fine a comb you have to carry with you when you're a claims adjuster. If you're in the shower and the water is coming out of the shower head, that's not leaking. And if the water coming out of the shower head gets down behind the tile or behind the drain, that didn't leak. The water that came out of the shower head was supposed to come out of it, and so now that's one fact situation. But if water is leaking from within the pipe behind the wall, now that's a leak. If the shower pan has failed and there's water leaking out of the shower pan and into the closets or wherever, that's a leak. So claims can actually come down to, well, was the tile and the grout faulty and just water coming out of the shower head got back behind there, because that's almost never going to be covered because it's not a leak. It's
purposeful.
Yeah, water. If we could find a way to dehydrate water so that it wasn't so wet, then you could probably cut insurance rates across the board by 50%. But no one's been able to come up with that.
Well, I think Stephen
Wright.
Thing, yes.
Type thing. I got some instant water, but I didn't know what to add to it.
That would cut insurance rates across the board right there. Because if it's not the sinks, it's the dishwashers. If it's not them, it's the washing machines. It's everywhere, and it's
well, I've had some circumstances where I had somebody had failed shower pans, and it was a fairly new construction. And fortunately, the builder was such good integrity that he came out and repaired them, even though it was out of his warranty period, but it caused a tremendous amount of damage to the joist and thing that was over. Sure. It was a master bath that was over a garage, and of course it was all the joists in the garage that started rotting. And then retroactively trying to repair joists is a massive enterprise.
Yep, got to have a good carpenter, and you can do that correctly, and you can do it incorrectly.
Now, is that something that's going to be covered?
Typically, yes, because here. If it the shower pan itself, in the old days it was lead. It was a lead liner and was folded up, and it rotted out. Yeah, and then there was different. But if the shower pan itself actually failed, that's one thing. If the drain around it failed, that's another thing. So there's all of those building components in there. Depending on exactly what the policy says it covers and doesn't, it gets.
Well, I've seen some of the construction. If they have a seat in like in a shower, and the seat's usually built out of wood,
right? And
they staple the butyl rubber to the seat, so oftentimes that kind of builds in a potential leak right there.
Yep,
and
it does.
And that's what the circumstances
But that example where you're talking about the seat, that's going to have water hitting it that's coming out of the shower head, and that's not leaking because water is supposed to come out of the shower head. And so it's very difficult because you do see those claims where, no, that's not an accidental loss. That's failure because what that comes down to in technical contract terms is
we're denying your claim.
Well, no, you're supposed to. You can see, you can observe easily the state of your tile and grout, and you're supposed to maintain it. And that's sort of a preventable loss.
So there's an expectations in all policies that owners are going to maintain their property.
That's right.
Correctly.
And so that's why water coming out of the shower head and then getting back behind the tile that maybe wasn't maintained properly, it gets to be a question of, okay, that's really not an accidental loss under the terms of some policies, and it becomes an issue.
I keep hearing Bon Jovi's song going off my mind saying, "Shot through the heart and you're to blame. You give leaks a bad name."
Yeah. Water leaks are.
I don't remember it that way. It's funny how your brain works. It must be hard to be inside there.
Yes.
But it's actually timely because we've got a whole different category of water problems about to begin because it's springtime and we're going to see some flooding and rains are going to come and the tropical storms and the hurricanes. And as we come into that and there's a whole body of thought about.
That's interesting because I get people come in from out of other states, and they always say, the trouble with Houston doesn't have any seasons. I said, that's not true. We have the cockroach season.
We do.
We have the hurricane season. 2 days of spring and 2 days of fall.
Love bug season. Don't forget love bug season.
Oh yeah, you gotta get love bugs.
5 seasons.
Yes. Yeah, we do. One of the things, Tim, talk a little bit about this. We are coming into a season in which a lot of times you've got the hurricanes, you've got the storms. If you're not binded when those things hit the Gulf, that can delay a closing. That can delay you being able to issue out a binder until it passes through. How does sort of that work? I mean, what's the reasoning behind it? And talk to our general listeners about what happens right there.
Well,
as opposed to our random listeners.
Yes,
our general listeners.
Our general listeners.
That whole concept comes if you picture not so much the Gulf in this example, but picture the river. Many years ago, the FEMA and the National Flood wasn't not that it had some problems. So
still does.
You had instant binding in those days. So people who lived upriver could call down to the people who lived downriver and say, hey, water will probably be there in 2 days. You better go buy some flood insurance tomorrow. And they would, and it would be instant coverage, and then the water would come and they would flood, and that's how it was. And then you could cancel the policy 3 days after the flood. So it was not the best designed system.
The good old days.
I can't imagine
What happened to those good old days?
why that failed.
Well, yeah, exactly. So I think at one point they put in a 60-day waiting period for coverage, and that's down to 30 days now. So generally speaking, there's a 30-day waiting period for coverage when you buy a flood insurance policy, unless there's a mortgage. And if it's a mortgage, which is generally going to be backed by the government, then flood insurance goes into effect immediately when you are financing with the mortgage. So it's kind of it's strange because people say, well, I'm paying cash for my house, so my flood insurance doesn't go into effect immediately, but if I have a mortgage, then it does. And yep, that's right. But now if there's a hurricane spinning around, we have the 80-20 latitude, longitude. That's kind of where it's inside the Gulf. And so underwriting is suspended in a lot of times when there's a storm impending, for sure.
Closings delayed because once it gets past Florida, all bets are off.
They are. And so, everyone has to stop underwriting.
And we appreciate the state of Florida. We need something to shield us from all those hurricanes.
We do, yeah.
So thank you, Florida.
Florida. No place is safe. You've seen storms come from the Atlantic all the way across the Florida Peninsula and then come back to the Gulf, and then they come spin back around, and they can cross Florida 2 and 3 times, the same storm.
One word, Allison.
Yeah.
I mean, there was
Tim,
something.
now, how can we reach you, by the way?
281-358-4444 is the phone number, and the website is the same, 281-358-4444.com, and I'm Tim at all of that.
At all that.
Well, we're coming up against our lightning round that we always like to do.
Tim's got the mic, so
Tim is all that.
Let's start off with Tim. And Tim, let us know in 30 seconds what you would like the listeners to leave with today's show with, other than their shirts.
And be brilliant.
Someone offers you a cigar, just say no.
Wow.
Or call Vaughn, he said. Yes. How about you, Michael Roddy?
And if the High Cigar Lounge is listening, we didn't really mean that.
After today's show, I think we're going to need a glossary. We've thrown out all these initials and all these terms,
actually,
and
a Rat Pack dictionary.
Yes, quite a bit of information today. For me, great time to buy. Absolutely great time to buy. As you mentioned earlier, Chris, the interest rates are at historic levels in a good way.
Yes.
And don't see much in the way of volatility coming for the remainder of this year. I think that the market is normalizing and becoming a fantastic market right now, and just a great time to buy and actually a great time to sell as well.
I would agree, and I tell everybody, don't listen to the national media either. Remember,
that's correct.
Here in Houston, we are a different market, still a very strong market. And, one of the things that we still have, we have a very strong real estate buyer's market, seller's market. So whatever the national media says about what's going on in some other areas, especially some oil and gas fields up on the north side of the country, don't listen to it.
Absolutely. And real estate is very local. You're absolutely right.
And if you're dealing with cigar residual funk.
Yes. And speaking of cigar residual funk, what would you like to everybody leave us with?
If you have a problem with smoke, mold, or odor in your home or a home you're trying to buy or sell, please call me, Vaughn Peterson with Clean Air Services, 832-276-6000.
And let me tell you, it does work.
Tonight, live in concert, cigar residual funk.
What I tell everybody is it's no different. If you're out there, look at the rates today. If you are in a home and not buying a new one, look at refinancing. If it's beneficial to you. If not, make sure you get out there and get with a good individual. If you're buying a home, they can do it. Teresa Kennedy sent us in a great quote for the weekend. Obviously, it's very appropriate.
Quote of the week.
It says, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son.
Yay!
So true.
Happy
Easter
weekend,
to everybody.
Everybody have a great weekend. Until next time, we are out.
And you've been listening to the Real Estate Rat Pack. The question is, who's Frank, who's Sammy, who's Dean, and who's the other guy?
Chris is Frank, he's Dean, and I'm Sammy.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So tune in to the really big show every Saturday at 9 a.m. right here on 100.7 The Word, KKHT.